Grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our church. Amen. We have quorum. Very well, you can start.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Could the members making their way trooping fast? Honourable members, I wish to introduce to you a delegation of members of parliament from Australia. The delegation seated in the speaker's row comprises of the following: the Honourable Andrew Broad, MP, the Honourable Luke Atsuka, MP, the Honourable Tim Watts, MP, and the Honourable Graham Pera, MP. The delegation is accompanied by Her Excellency Ms. Alison Charles, the High Commissioner of Australia to Kenya, Mr. Jonathan Ball, Deputy High Commissioner to Kenya, Mr. Christian Josiah, Staff Australian High Commissioner, and Ms. Julia Searle, the Delegation Secretary. Honourable members, the delegation has been in the country since 3rd of June 2018 to meet with National Assembly leadership and as well as to interact with their counterparts. On our own behalf and on behalf of the National Assembly, I wish to welcome them to the National Assembly and wish them fruitful engagements during the remainder of their stay in the country. I thank you, honourable members.
Order number 3, messages.
Honourable members, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 41, I wish to report to the House that I have received a message from the Senate regarding its passage of the County Allocation of Revenue Bill, Senate Bill number 11 of 2018. The message reads in part, and I quote, "On Wednesday, May 30th, 2018, the Senate considered the County Allocation of Revenue Bill, Senate Bill number 11 of 2018, and passed the said bill with amendments. The Senate now seeks the concurrence of the National Assembly on the same bill in accordance with the provisions of Article 111 of the Constitution. Honourable members, the County Allocation of Revenue Bill is an annual legislation introduced in accordance with the provisions of Article 218 of the Constitution, with the objective of equitably allocating the share of national revenue amongst the 47 counties. Honourable members, the bill stands committed to the Budget and Appropriations Committee for consideration. Standing order number 234 requires this House
Statements of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management for the year that ended 30th June 2016 and the certificate therein. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairperson, Committee on Delegated Legislation.
Honorable Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, June 6, 2018. Report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on the Civil Aviation Remote Piloted Aircraft Systems Regulations 2017. Thank you.
Very well. The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, I don't have the report. I will seek your indulgence that I do it tomorrow morning, Mr. Speaker.
Tomorrow morning?
Or the afternoon.
Tomorrow afternoon?
Yes, sir.
Very well. The Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. I have approved that report. Honorable Limo. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, June 06, 2018, report of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning on the Tax Laws Amendment Bill 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry. Honourable members, I think when we are busy transacting business, as much as possible, try to avoid coming to because you distract me also. Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Lands. As the Chairperson, the Honourable Rachel Nyamai, the Vice Chair, Khatib Mwashitani, absent, not desiring to be present.
Chair.
Yes, is that the case?
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Who is this? Oh.
I want to represent the chair for Lands Committee.
That must be, is it?
Honorable Mishi.
But the name that shows here is Mutua Mwekali.
Yes, because I don't have the new card, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Do you have the reports?
Yes, I do have the report. I want to read on behalf, I want to table it on behalf of Rachel.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. On behalf of the chair for the Lands Committee, Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, June 6, 2018. Report of the Departmental Committee on Lands on the Land Value Index Laws Amendment Bill 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Very well. Next order. Ooh. Agriculture. The Chair, Agriculture. The Vice Chair. Proceed, Honorable Wangwe.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Wednesday, June 6, 2018. Report on the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock on Warehouse Receipt Systems Bill 2018. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Any other chair of a committee desirous of tabling reports on their consideration of the various bills? Very well. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Honorable Shelley.
Honorable Speaker,
No,
I beg
no,
to-
no. You're not on record. Yes.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to give the notice of the following motion. That this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation laid on the table of this House today, Wednesday, June 6, 2018, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 15 of the Statutory Instruments Act and the Standing Order number 210, subsection 4B, annuls in its entirety the Civil Aviation Remote Piloted Aircraft Systems Regulations 2017. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Very well. Next order.
Order number 7, statements. Order number 8, motion, report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget estimates for the financial year 2018-2019, general debate, second allotted day.
Who was on the floor, or does anybody have a balance of speaking time? The last chair of which committee? The chairperson, Departmental Committee on Finance. It's your chance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this very, very important business of the House. And before I contribute, Mr. Speaker, I want to state very clearly that this House is a budget-making House, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I want to really insist on the members that this is a very important exercise where we should put a lot of energy to ensure that whatever is budgeted is going to work for the betterment of this country. And it is going to contribute to the welfare of our citizens, especially now that the President has pronounced himself on 4 pillars, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, all our energies should actually focus on ensuring that whatever we do in this particular budget is going to help Kenyans to get a better life in future, and we are not going to regret. Mr. Speaker, it is actually very sad that some of the times you'll find allocations which are given in the budget are not very, very clear in terms of delivering these particular 4 pillars. Mr. Speaker, my committee oversights several state departments, including the National Treasury and Ministry of Planning, the Ministry of Devolution, the Department of National Planning, the Commission on Revenue Allocation, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, Mr. Speaker, and the Office of the Controller of Budget. Mr. Speaker, this current budget cycle, when it started, Mr. Speaker, we pronounced ourselves on the BPS, which is a budget policy statement, where the various MDAs and the departments clearly surround and ensuring that the country moves on. Our committee, Mr. Speaker, discussed this particular budget, and we observed several, we made several observations, Mr. Speaker, which I want to bring to your attention. Mr. Speaker, most of the commissions, let me start from the commissions, Mr. Speaker. The commission which we oversight, Mr. Speaker, is a CRA, which is the Commission on Revenue Allocation. And Mr. Speaker, I want to state very clearly that this particular CRA has new commissioners. And we have stated very clearly to the commissioners who are now in office that they must move away from the approach which the previous committee was following, Mr. Speaker, where in terms of identifying the marginalized areas, issues of marginalization is actually widespread. We want a situation where in every constituency there is even a sub-location which is marginalized. So we are asking the CRA to change the policy and ensure that any sub-location, even a village, an isolated village, which is deemed to be marginalized in the spirit of the Constitution, should be actually identified and funded, Mr. Speaker. You see, it was very sad that in the previous commission, the then chairperson, when he visited with the commission a county called Kitui County, he actually shedded tears because he found people were suffering, they didn't have food, they didn't have classrooms, children were studying under trees. But in the marginalized counties, Kitui is not included. So it is actually a paradox which we want to remove in this country. So in terms of policy changes, we actually recommended to the CRA that they move to the smallest unit of this country, including even a village. Mr. Speaker, the allocation for this particular commission was deemed to be it was not very adequate, but we actually asked them to utilize whatever they had, and we recommended little increase for the purpose of working around a change of formula. The change of formula also is another thing which should be changed properly to ensure that the weights which are currently given in terms of we must relook whether we have to go and we have to review the way we look at population, the way we look at land mass, and rethink around whether we are actually allocating resources which are not going to result in marginalization in future. Mr. Speaker, if you continuously allocate without looking back, you will find those counties which are currently seen to be ahead of others, in few years' time, they will be backward and it will be very difficult to catch up with the rest. Mr. Speaker, so for this particular commission, Mr. Speaker, we have actually recommended policy change and they must look at the country in totality. The last one on this commission, Mr. Speaker, you have realized that every time they always want to bring a coalition between the national government and the county governments. They look at the revenues, but they don't look at really the percentage growth in revenue vis-a-vis the allocations, Mr. Speaker. They just allocate without critically looking at the capacity of the country to raise that particular revenue. This country, Mr. Speaker, must move away from the spirit of sharing the cake. All of us must be counted. We must also talk and put a lot of effort in terms of baking the cake. The issue of calling each other and saying we share should actually be something of the past. And the way to go is for this particular commission to participate in also recommending policies which will actually bring a lot of revenue to this country, and therefore they should be looking outside the box. Mr. Speaker, let me come to another commission which is normally very unpopular in this House. Mr. Speaker, we must move away from individuals. We must move away from putting individuals into positions. When they sit in that position, they forget that they are in public office. They must do their work in good faith. Mr. Speaker, the Salaries and Remuneration Commission is another commission which is actually like a commission we don't really understand. Because in the previous dispensation, Mr. Speaker, we didn't have this commission. But salaries was being shared in an amicable manner. But currently, Mr. Speaker, before this commissioner's term ended, they had actually created a situation where when the Kenyans hears SRC, they think of parliament.
guide the budget making process. And the executive needs to be cautious when preparing the budget estimates. It needs to be synchronized with the budget policy statement. But when you look at the budget estimates and compare with what this House passed in the budget policy statement, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that there are very many areas of variance and there is non-compliance. However, the law requires that when there is a variance, Mr. Speaker, or the BPS or estimates differ from the BPS, the budget policy statement, it's required that the National Treasury submit a memorandum which would explain the reasons why those deviations became necessary. However, Mr. Speaker, for the first time, we want to commend the Treasury for bringing memorandum explaining the reasons as to why there is a variation between the budget policy statement and the budget estimates. However, Mr. Speaker, some of the reasons that have been advanced for the deviations could have been foreseen at the time of preparing the budget policy statement. And therefore, it is not making sense at all why the variation captured at the time of preparing the budget policy statement. And I have in mind an example like the issue of collection of appropriation in aid, which we have been talking about every time we debate the budget estimates. We have been very clear that appropriation in aid, the way it is captured in our records, the way it is put in our budget, does not enhance accountability. Therefore, we expected, Mr. Speaker, that this time round, that this would have been foreseen and presented the way we wanted it to be done at the time of preparing the budget policy statement. But what we have seen is that the Treasury waited until now, the budget estimates, to capture the appropriation in aid. It has been allocated Kenya shillings 4.7 billion, and there is no explanation as to why this requirement of submitting revenue allocated and expenditures for the equalization were not submitted by the Treasury. But, Mr. Speaker, more fundamentally, the equalization fund is a requirement of the Constitution, and therefore the National Treasury must provide the amount and based on percentage that is provided for in the Constitution. The 4.7 billion provided for, Mr. Speaker, is not in compliance and does not conform. Simplified Mwananchi budget is prepared by the National Treasury and perhaps hanged in the website of the Treasury so that Wanjiku can understand and engage with the budget. But, Mr. Speaker, this publication is not there. Mr. Speaker, public participation in budget making process is a constitutional requirement. And therefore, budget is not just prepared for finance experts. It is not just prepared for accountants and economists. It is also prepared for Mama Mboga in the street. We expect that the Treasury needs to prepare always, every financial year, a simplified Mwananchi budget version. A version of financing in order to reduce accumulation of public debt. This policy, Mr. Speaker, requires planned action to contain growth in expenditure and improvement of revenue performance. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal policy direction of the country remains unclear as expenditure pressures are likely to persist, leading to widening of the deficit if expenditure is not well controlled. Mr. Speaker, I cannot overemphasize this point. If we do not control the expenditure pressures that we experience, if we do not contain the appetite of the ministries, the hunger by which ministries, government departments, and agencies are continuously increasing their expenditure requirements, Mr. Speaker, this country will not cope in terms of financing the budget. And the net effect is that the country will continue to borrow money, and this borrowing either will come from domestic sources or external sources. Of course, when the borrowing comes from domestic sources, there is the attendant risk of raising the interest rates because we'll be crowding out the private sector. But again, even if we go externally to borrow money, of course we are increasing again the cost of borrowing money from the external market. I will remind this House that if you just try to compare the rate at which we borrowed the first Eurobond and compare to the rate at which we are borrowing now, you will realize that now we are borrowing money from the external market at a higher cost, at a higher interest rate. And this is because of our appetite for borrowing, which makes our risk of repaying the loan higher, and of course, there must be a cost to it. Mr. Speaker, on the revenue side, there is concern that the projected revenue may not be achieved, given that the proposed revenue enhancement initiatives that are not, which are the Treasury is coming up with, are not new. Hence, we might not yield any extra much needed resources as anticipated. Mr. Speaker, I know the finance bill has not been tabled. I know we are yet to receive the Cabinet Secretary in this House on 14th of June to present to us budget highlights and revenue-raising measures. We will wait for Mr. Rotich to come before us and tell us how he is preparing to finance the budget, the 2018-2019, the ambitious 2018-2019 budget. But be that as it may, there are already indications that there is no much serious new sources of revenue. Mr. Speaker, I want to move quickly because I can see I am pressed of time. I want to touch on a few areas before I sit down, and this is on specifics. First, Mr. Speaker, we must agree as a House that this country, because of the effects of the recent rains, there is a problem in terms of the infrastructure. And Mr. Speaker, because our infrastructure has a challenge, the Budget Committee has decided to allocate to each constituency
Yes, I will give the Honorable John Bandi 2 more minutes. I know you have a lot of passion for this. This is your area.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll rush to finish the 2 points that I wanted to put across. I wanted just to tell this House that contrary to what came from the Treasury, we have decided, and the Treasury was very reluctant, to allocate to each constituency 30 million shillings for the maintenance of our roads, because there is no road anywhere in the country. So we can't even say that we are going to look at those constituencies which have problems. All constituencies have problems with roads. We need to
contribute to this motion. I would like to start by thanking the committee on budget and appropriation for a very thorough job which they have done. Mr. Speaker, as parliamentarians, our role of oversight is not limited to looking at expenditure, but rather we should be also concerned about how the projects are identified, as well as how allocation of the available resources are allocated to prioritized projects, and thereafter how the government ministries and agencies spend the money allocated, and so on and so forth. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that for the first time, the committee has indicated that the Treasury is more forthcoming with a lot of information. We are coming from history of a situation where a lot of information is withheld from the members of the public, and at times, even from the committee of this House, which is supposed to scrutinize the budget and so on and so forth. One major area, Mr. Speaker, when we sat in our departmental committee on environment and natural resources, one key area which we identified as a gap is actually the Big Four agenda and how the resources are allocated to ensure that the objective of the 4 agendas are achieved. What we realized is that the ministries were struggling to align what they have proposed with the Big Four agenda. And therefore, I strongly agree with one of the recommendations in this report that probably the Big Four agenda need to be introduced to this House as a sessional paper so that all agencies and all stakeholders are obliged to plan in accordance with the 4 big agenda. Mr. Speaker, for example, when you look at the universal health care, without the community health volunteers, it will be very difficult for us as a country to achieve what we intend to achieve under that particular agenda. These are the people who don't earn anything, but they are very key in ensuring that our people access basic health care. But unfortunately, as it has been highlighted in this particular report, nothing is provided for in terms of motivating the community health volunteers. Another important thing which probably has been captured in this particular report, which I agree with and which probably, although the money allocated is not enough, is to enable the infrastructure development by allocating a certain money, specifically to ensure that the destruction that we have seen to our infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, and so on and so forth, is done. Without infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, it will be very difficult for us to realize the economic development that we intend to achieve as a country. And therefore, that is very much in order, although the amount allocated is far much below what the CS and the PS for infrastructure indicated as what they require to help them rehabilitate infrastructure which have been destroyed by the floods occasioned by enhanced rain in the season which is ending. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to speak about the equalization fund. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the most important elements in the current constitution, which was purposely put there to enable the marginalized areas to catch up with the rest of Kenya. We do appreciate that there are marginalized pockets of marginalization in all the counties, but also I would like to encourage my colleagues to appreciate that in as much as we have pockets of marginalization in each and every county in this country, there are counties where you will find the entire sub-county, which is marginalized, and so on and so forth. And therefore, as we try to encourage the CRA to come up with a new policy to define marginalization, we need to be aware of the fact that there are counties.
Member for Makueni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, first I want to applaud the Committee on Budget on its public participation, which, Mr. Speaker, is in accordance with the Constitution. And I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, Makueni was one of the counties which was picked. And, Mr. Speaker, the team came to the headquarters of Makueni County, which is also the headquarters of Makueni constituency. The public had an opportunity to engage this committee. Mr. Speaker, from the report, I can see out of 3 main projects, Mr. Speaker, which the Wananchi gave to this committee, only one was considered, Mr. Speaker, the bridge of Thwake River, which was allocated 150 million shillings. Mr. Speaker, there is a very, very important road which was proposed and unfortunately has not been captured. And also there are houses. There is a government house which was started in the 1990s, was abandoned, and I brought a petition in this house, and it was approved and should have been taken care of. Though we appreciate, Mr. Speaker, we cannot have all projects taken at once. Mr. Speaker, the road of Ukia Emali links up from Loitoktok links up several counties. And if prepared, Mr. Speaker, and I'm really pleading with the government and the committee in future, and probably if we could rearrange this budget, it will be, there will be a road linking from Emali to Wote, to Masi, to Kidimane, and one could easily travel from Loitoktok to be like sort of a bypass from Loitoktok to Embu or Loitoktok to Nyeri through Thika, and avoid, you see, the main Nairobi road, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, although the people of Makueni gave this road as a priority. And when the president was there when doing his campaign at a place called Matiliku, actually did promise this road, Mr. Speaker. It is surprising that it's been left out, but we do appreciate for the allocation of the Forke Bridge, which, where a lot of people have perished during the rainy season, and where the governor of Makueni, the Honorable Kibuta Kibwana, had already started doing it, though it's a national government project, and I'm happy now that the national government project has taken up of it. Most important, Mr. Speaker, also, during the recent rains, Mr. Speaker, a lot of roads have been washed, and there is literally no roads anywhere in the country, especially the earth roads. Even the tarmac roads, most of them have been worn out. I do welcome the idea of 30 million shillings per constituency. Of course, we know we have the former carer, which now is dealing with rural roads. Of course, they have got officially already gazetted roads, but it will be better when there be a strategy, or now the member of parliament and the local team will identify cases and the roads where the county government has not been able to do, so that these monies can be applied, Mr. Speaker, and the roads can be repaired. We appreciate that the damage caused by the recent rains, Mr. Speaker, is actually equivalent to our budget for 1 year, and it will take quite some years to be able to cover the damage occasioned by the recent rains. Monies be released as early as possible so that the monies can be able to serve the people of Kenya. You know, immediately after the budget has been approved, it takes many months for it to be actualized. It can even take 3-4 months for these monies to get to ground. But on the issue of the 30 million shillings, Mr. Speaker, for emergency, should be applied as quickly as possible. And Mr. Speaker, also, we always keep an emergency kit during the budgeting time. And it's clear that when we have to apply it, a lot of times, like in this case, it's much less than what would be expected, Mr. Speaker. So I will be requesting if we could move on the emergency so that we can handle the emergency situations in the country. They are quite numerous, and a lot of damage has been occasioned. And I really want to thank the Budgetary Committee for a job well done, Mr. Speaker, and for visiting my county and my constituency. And I believe they were treated very well, and they were very happy. So I believe in the future, when they go into other counties, the same should happen. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, we make every effort to recognize every member by their constituency. Special constituency nominee 001.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And from the onset, may I take this opportunity to thank the Budget Committee for such good presentation that I presented the budget of 2018-2019 to this House. It was an impressive presentation, I must say. Honorable Speaker, I was particularly impressed by the reduction of NYS funds from 25 billion to 18 billion. This is very important because as a country and as a House that is given the authority by our Constitution to oversight the executive, whenever we realize that there is loopholes of wastage of public fund, then we should actually fire the first shot by reducing their budget. And the reduction of the NYS fund, which was actually reallocated to empowerment of our youth, especially in training, because we have realized as a country, we have invested so much on social protection strategies, leaving the empowerment in terms of training of our youth. We have mega corruption, like what we have witnessed in the recent 2 months of mega corruption in NYS, Kenya Power, and so on, maize scandals and so on. Honorable Speaker, we'll be raising a lot of money from revenue, raising a lot of money from poor Kenyans, but still, then we lose this money to corrupt cartels. Honorable Speaker, we should have strategies of protecting this fund. Honorable Speaker, I was also very much impressed by the allocation of 30 million to each constituency for the repair of roads, because we know we have had enhanced rainfall, which have caused a few distractions to our infrastructure. So, Honorable Speaker, it was very impressive that we have allocated 30 million for the repair of roads and other infrastructure. Honorable Speaker, I'm also a happy man that all those companies that were mentioned in these mega corruptions and all those cartels that were mentioned in graft, none of them is a person with disability. None of them, no company of persons with disability was actually mentioned. Honorable Speaker, I seek your indulgence to give direction to ministries, departments, and agencies of the government to allocate more tenders to persons with disability, because they are very clean people. They don't have corruption. We have 6 million Kenyans with disability, and there is none of them that was mentioned in this corruption.
Honourable members, you know, understanding order number 1, the Speaker is allowed to make certain adjustments. I'm going to do so with respect to the next member, who must not be interrupted, and because the motion, in this motion, every other member speaking speaks for 5 minutes, I will therefore extend to the member a balance of 5 more minutes. So you speak for 10 minutes maximum. The member for Vihiga, Kivai Ogesi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to speak in this House for the first time. Let me say from the beginning, Mr. Speaker, as a first-time member, I've had challenges catching your eye. And by now I have learned my ropes. I will know how to catch your eye when I want to. From the beginning, Mr. Speaker, let me thank the people of Vihiga for electing me as their Member of Parliament, and I give them my commitment to ensure that I serve them with dedication. With every dedication I have, I will do that. Let me also thank the party that sponsored me to this House, that is Amani National Congress, for finding it fit to sponsor me successfully to this House. As you have indicated, Mr. Speaker, being my first time to talk in this House, and before I make my comments on the budget, let me just make my comments on a few issues touching on the state of our nation. Let me start with the obvious one, the handshake. Personally, I really support the initiative as a first good move, a first step. But, Mr. Speaker, I think it is very important when we want to bring people together, when we want to bring the people of Kenya together, we should have a lot of inclusivity. We should carry everybody. We should not leave anybody behind, because immediately you do that, you attract a bit of resentment. So for us, we are saying this was a very good first step. A lot of work still needs to be done, and I will encourage everybody to... corruption, if we don't check it, is a cancer. I come from an area where, just because of corruption, so almost all our industries are on its deathbed. In fact, most of them have closed. Personally, I must say, I used to work for a very nice... It is a question of going to the underlying issues. In Mumias, for example, because I understand it very well, the problem is lack of cane. You cannot run a sugar factory when there is no cane. That company has a lot of machinery and everything that will take, but so long as you don't have cane, and if we continue pumping in money, I duly submit that that could be waste of time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me that chance to just touch on those things which are dear to me. And I think now I can talk on budget, which happens to be my specialty as well. This was my first time to participate in the budget-making process in this House. I think it was a good experience, but I want to say there are still some challenges I noticed. We are supposed to be the budget-making House, and budget-making is a cycle. It's not an action. It's a whole cycle. It starts with actually identifying what you are budgeting for. But my experience when I was doing, making deliberations in my committee, my experience was that, to me, this budget is being made elsewhere. It's being made elsewhere. Because the first time I saw anything on budget is when we were looking at the review paper. The next thing was when we were now being furnished with the ceilings. Now, after the ceilings were given, the next thing we did was the estimates were brought to us. I think by the time the estimates were coming to us, I found that the role of our committee is very limited, because I remember the famous word. Famous word was, don't change anything unless you can find somewhere else. So if you add here, you must subtract here. That is the guiding principle we were given. But I would submit this. I would say, I think we need to look at budget in totality. We must, every year, when we are doing the budget review paper, I think this parliament should be appraised on what are the real factors that will guide us. Lucky for us, we have the 4 pillars that are guiding us. So everything around budget making should have been revolving around the pillar. The next thing is, what are we going to do around those pillars? Then, how do we finance it? The other problem I found when we were doing this budget is, especially starting with the supplementary, I found that we wasted a lot of time in our committees trying to work out what should be done and what should not be done. But you find that I think we allow the executive to interfere into that process, because I am aware of some cases where it was made very clear to us that it was very important to make some changes, which we did. But somewhere, somebody somewhere simply cancelled. And while on the issue of supplementary budgets, I think if we are making a good budget, we shouldn't entertain so many supplementaries, because supplementary could be a way of people not making good budgets. Because within a span of 1 year, you should be able to know what you're going to do. But if we have a situation where every year we are having 3 supplementaries, 2 supplementaries, it could be a way of just bypassing the good budget-making process. So we should actually have a way of discouraging this supplementary budget. Now, another thing which came out clear during the budget-making process was, and this one impacts on what I'm talking about supplementaries, the development budget. The development budget is just taken as an appendage. Nobody takes it seriously. When there is no money, it is the first casualty of the budget. That is very dangerous. That's very dangerous. We should safeguard, ring fence the development budget, because you cannot always steal from the development budget in order to finance the recurrent. I think that is something, as we move forward, we should take into account. Listening to the presentation of the budget committee, I should have started by actually appreciating the job they did. I think it was a very good job, very thorough. I've actually heard I attended some of their meetings, and I've had a chance to go through the whole report. I think they've done a commendable job. But I was just a bit worried when they say that they will be visiting various counties, and it is only when they visit your county that you are likely to be seen. You are likely to be considered. I think you should not wait for that. There are ways of us getting information from our counties, what is important, what is not important. So when the projects were being read, I just kept on wondering, where is Vihiga in all this? Is Vihiga in Kenya? Because I never had any project anywhere near. And if we say you wait for your turn, it might be too late. So that's another consideration that we should take in mind. Mr. Speaker, sir, when I've been a victim of, as I said, I started by indicating that I have not been able to catch your eye for a very long time. And in the process, some infamous list was circulated of people who have not talked in the House. Now, let me say this, and I think it's common knowledge to all of us, that a lot of parliamentary work is done in committees. If this was a good job being done by whoever did it, he should at least have checked with the parliamentary committees to see what is our input. We all cannot speak here. Some are unluckier than others. So that list caused a lot of, I think, hurt in a lot of people. And I would not like to think, I don't want to think it started from this House. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, I have now learned the tricks, how to catch your eye, and I intend to be a very active member of this House. Thank you very much.
Member for Turkana North.
Thank you. The problem I have with the mode of identifying the revenue streams is that the government has intended to increase taxes on some essential items which have an implication of reducing the marginal propensity to consume of the Kenyan population. Honorable Speaker, the government ought to go ahead or further to identify more taxable items so that it increases the tax base of the tax regime and be able to collect as much revenue as possible. Honorable Speaker, the budget report also gives highlight on ways of containing inflation at 5%. But it doesn't also highlight on how it's going to deal with unforeseeable factors that affect the government projections on the inflation rate. For example, the issues of floods, the amount allocated for contingency on emergency responses is so little, and therefore the government cannot adequately be able to deal with issues that are unforeseen. Honorable Speaker, there is need for the government to have a look at the infrastructure as a way of stimulating the economic growth. Infrastructure has a tendency of increasing the consumption and the development agenda of that country. And recently, His Excellency the President was awarded, was given an award for the year as a champion of an infrastructure development in the continent. Honorable Speaker, the report also gives highlight on government commitment on corruption. But I have a problem with the manner at which the government is intending to fight this vice. Corruption has become a national character. And therefore, apart from fighting graft nationally, there should be an effort to scale it down to counties, which have become the center of corruption. State corporations are also supposed to be roped in as areas where the government must endeavor to work so hard to make sure that allocations for development is properly looked into. There is also the need to seal loopholes and leakages of the economy. Honorable Speaker, when you look at the banked population of Kenya, it is quite smaller than unbanked, just because there is a lot of money in circulation which the government has no record of about. And therefore, the government cannot be able to account for its own capital base when much of the population is not banked. Honorable Speaker, finally on the issue of the debt burden, Kenya has gone ahead to have a lot of borrowing, both internally and externally. And now, the Treasury is trying to develop a regulation where the debt is calculated.
Member for Kiminini.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I want to congratulate the Committee on Budgets for the work well done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for once, we've always been talking about this issue of budget-making house. Mr. Speaker, we are under the presidential system. And ordinarily, under the presidential system, Parliament is a budget-making house. It's very unfortunate in the last term, Mr. Speaker, this Parliament was more of a rubber stamp than a budget-making house. But this time, Mr. Speaker, I can see some improvement. I can see some improvement because we're not just going to stamp whatever is going to be brought here. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I want to quickly mention something on education. I've had so many teachers suffering, Mr. Speaker. The teachers have not been paid their pension up to now. I've just gone through the schedule with my brother here, and it is very, very unfortunate that this financial year we have no allocation for the teachers' pension, Mr. Speaker. The teachers who have exited, who have retired, Mr. Speaker, they should be given their money. For how long are they going to wait for their money, Mr. Speaker? We are going to bring an amendment, Mr. Speaker, so that we can give a provision for the teachers' pension, Mr. Speaker, which has been long overdue. Mr. Speaker, secondly, I want to ask the committee on the budget, what was the criteria of sampling these counties, Mr. Speaker? It is very, very long. We must understand what was the sampling framework. Because the essence of public participation when it comes to budget making, Mr. Speaker, is for them to go to a specific county, listen to them, understand what are the issues, what is the problem, so that they factor it, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the budget allocation. Mr. Speaker, when I talk about Trans Nzoia County, for the last 4 years, we've not had any project in Trans Nzoia County, Mr. Speaker. And I wish the chairman of budget who should be listening to me, and this is something they should be knowing, Mr. Speaker, some of these comments that we put across, the chairman, honorable member for Ichungwa, he should be also be listening and understand our concerns, Mr. Speaker, so that at a later stage when you bring amendments. I'm saying this because, Mr. Speaker, there's
Honorable Amalwa, you are making a very valid point. Anybody in whose name a report is tabled here, or a bill that comes before the House should always be here when members are contributing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because there is the opportunity to reply.
Exactly.
Honorable members, I think it is something that we must avoid. If you have signed a bill and you are moving it here, you must sit here and listen to contribution from our members.
Yes.
So that when you are replying to that which you've heard.
Absolutely.
But now the habit which I've noticed is a member has put in a report, and then they go on a frolic in town. And then because there will be an opportunity to come and reply, come and say, I want to thank members for their contribution. Which one? which you have not had. So, Honorable Wamalo, don't worry about the time. I'm going to give you an extra
5 minutes.
2 minutes, because the point you are making is very valid.
Absolutely.
The chair of budget committee, budget appropriation, should actually be listening
and
or at
taking
least
notes.
have the clerks in who clerk his committee taking notes, so that when he replies, because he has a whole 15 minutes to reply, when he is replying, he must be saying what was said by the Honorable Wamalo about the sampling and about projects. This is the way we dealt with it in the committee. It cannot be that I want to thank members for their contributions and very useful, insightful. I mean, surely these are all very hollow words. You are cheating your colleagues. And I'm sure all of you know. You know that there are several members here who have that habit, that you have not been listening, you moved a bill, and you took off. And then 2 days or 3 days down the road, you are coming next Wednesday saying, I want to thank members for their very useful contributions. Surely. You just say, might as well just rise in your place at the bow and claim to have replied, instead of saying that, because you are not being honest and fair to the members. So please, the reason why we said we want the chairs of committees to give this report their first shot is also because they could find themselves also being criticized.
Yeah.
So please, let's take our work much more seriously.
When I look at the criteria that was used in the 12 counties that were here, West Pokot, Kajiado, Bungoma, Nakuru, Kirinyaga, Tharaka Nithi, Nairobi, Migori, Nyamira, Marsabit, Mombasa, and Makueni, I expected the chair, Mr. Speaker, to have said that we based on this in terms of sampling. Instead, they said we divided by 4. So if you divided by 4, how did you come up with these specific counties? I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, because for the last 4 years, Trans Nzoia has never been sampled to be one of the counties to be visited, Mr. Speaker. And as you know, Mr. Speaker, I'm humbly requesting, and God willing, to be the governor of Trans Nzoia in 2022, Mr. Speaker. So this is something I'm really actually concerned, because for the last 4 years, we did not have it. This is the 5th year now, we don't have Trans Nzoia. And specifically, Mr. Speaker, we have a road that comes from Tarbo. This road comes from Tarbo, it goes to Tongaren, it goes to Naitiri, it goes up to Saboti, it goes up to Swam. Mr. Speaker, looking at the schedules here, it's been allocated 100 million, Mr. Speaker. And there's a lot of conspiracy going on for that 100 million again to be removed from that particular road, Mr. Speaker. 10 years down the line, last time we had even a visit by His Excellency the President and the deputy in my county, Mr. Speaker, and I raised the issue about this road. We've been promised days come, days go. This time when I saw 100 million, I was like, is it tarmac or is this supposed to be Maram? And again, I'm surprised we've just had a discussion with the chair that they are moving an amendment to remove that particular 100 million to another particular road, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are going to oppose this, and whoever is intending to remove that money, we are not going to accept over our dead bodies, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are here as the representative of the people. We can't allow the few individuals, Mr. Speaker, to collude together for their own selfish interests, Mr. Speaker. And it's indeed important, Mr. Speaker, if it's going to be based on the member of a particular committee of budget that they are going to visit your respective county, then it is a challenge now to ask the whips so that we'll be able to decide who should be on that particular committee. If at all, if he goes there, then they are going to put money in their respective counties. Mr. Speaker, this report, I want to say they've done good work. But now, Mr. Speaker, I have a concern when it comes to the issue of the public debt, Mr. Speaker. The public debt in this country, Mr. Speaker, has been very high in terms of comparison to the GDP of this country. I know in other jurisdictions, when you compare to the United States, you compare to Japan, we'll say you are within the international standards. But the issue is this: you cannot compare United States, Japan, and Kenya. This is a developing country where we must be able to maintain the public debt. Otherwise, we are mortgaging our future generations. We are mortgaging our children, Mr. Speaker, our grandchildren. We must be able to borrow wisely. We should not go and overborrow. And I want us to borrow a leaf from His Excellency Mwai Kibaki. The time he was the president, you can see the way the economy was operating. He was not overborrowing. We know we are borrowing, yes, it's going to infrastructure, but let's borrow wisely. Please, my few minutes have not been added. Mr. Speaker, another issue I want to talk about is quickly on the issue of public hearing. The public hearing, Mr. Speaker, that is taking place, it is becoming a public relations exercise. Because the budget policy statement, once it's tabled here in February, and you are going for public hearing, it will not be incorporated. I agree it is important we should amend the Public Finance Management Act so that you can change the public hearing so that it comes early, maybe around November or October, so that whatever the wananchis are going to put in place, it can be incorporated in the budget policy statement. But what we are doing now, it is actually a PR exercise. Because once the budget policy statement has been tabled in this House, where it has given priority areas when it comes to the issues of the budget, that public hearing, Mr. Speaker, it is going to be actually useless. So it's indeed important that we should amend the PFM Act so that public hearing can come in October or November so that it can be incorporated.
Then there's a chance now we give to the father of the house.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance to contribute this important report. Mr. Speaker, first I want to thank the Budget Committee for having done so much work in such a short period. But, Mr. Speaker, I would like this Parliament to look at the 4 pillars, the 4 agenda. The agenda. It's not working? Yeah. This thing is too short for me. Okay. The 4 agenda of universal health, of food security, manufacturing, and housing. Such that I hope in this budget, I've not gone through it thoroughly, I hope in this budget proposal, they have made sure that at least every county has got at least one of the pillars being implemented in that county. Such that so we don't have a few, you say 12 counties receiving all these 4 agenda being implemented when the others are not being done. If it's food security is being done in Nairobi, maybe in Kisii we should have manufacturing. Maybe in Narok they should be having universal health care. Maybe in Mombasa they should be having housing. So that we don't have too many projects being undertaken in some counties when others are lacking on any project. The second thing, and I am with my little information, economics I know, I'm surprised that the Budget Committee can allocate funds to new projects and remove those funds from the projects which were there in the last financial year. Can I give an example? It's a road in my county, which connects 3 constituencies. That road was advertised last year 3 times, and they kept on saying they could not get a qualified bidder. Although some of the bidders who were said to not be qualified were given jobs elsewhere. Now that road doesn't have a single allocation, a single cent of allocation. They have now included, the committee has approved allocation to new projects, new road projects, and they have taken away the money which was there for that project. And it's not only in that case, it's not only in Kisii County, in many other counties in the country, whereby a committee removes the allocation for a project which has been promised, which has been pledged to the people of Kenya, as if it was being done only for elections. Mr. Speaker, my colleague has just talked about the national debt. National debt, you can incur national debt so long as you apply it appropriately. You apply it to make the economy of the country grow. And when you seek, especially international debt, seek it from a country like Japan, where if you borrow from them, they give you interest, they pay you interest. In Japan, instead of borrowing from America, whereby they will increase if you, the more you borrow, the higher they raise the interest. China is like America. It's just Japan, I know of the whole world, where they have got surplus funds and they don't know where to invest. 3, we should look at ways of establishing incentives for investors to invest in Kenya. Let us borrow from Dubai, for example, or Singapore. All we need to do is make our tax laws, make our investment laws attractive to potential investors. Because the potential investors are the only ones who can make our country develop economically. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the enabling pillars, the infrastructure, the water, they should take some.
Member for Emuhaya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this opportunity for me to make a contribution to this important business in the House today. And I first take this opportunity to congratulate the Chair of the Budget Committee for good work done, because they have been in many ways able to simplify the budget to a level that it can be understood by not only those who are professionals in the sector, but also those who are lay in the Republic of Kenya. But then let me take this opportunity to make a few comments. Number one, that this being a budget-making house, and given that from what we have heard from the budgets that were made in the previous year, this House had only a role of rubber stamping the budget. I want to draw the attention of the House to the fact that the now declared disaster on corruption, which the President is leading in fighting and which we should fight, begins at the moment of budget making. And I sit in the Committee of Labor and Social Protection, and that is where we oversight the institution called the NYS. And from what we looked at, this is an institution that has always been given a lot of money, but it has the inability to spend this money, and therefore that is where the looting of public coffers then begins. As a committee, we moved forward and reduced the budget of NYS by over 8 billion Kenya shillings. And now, moving forward, Mr. Speaker, sir, I must report that I know that there are moves by authorities from elsewhere to try and force or load upon the chair of the budget committee, because I had a discussion with him this morning, so that they only reduce the budget of this particular committee by 2.5 billion Kenya shillings. I want to ask honorable members that be on the lookout, that the attempts that we are making in this House in order to sanitize some of these institutions like NYS are bound to be thwarted if we don't stand strong as a House that makes budget moving forward. Number two, Mr. Speaker, sir, is on the budget for education. There are the big four agenda, and education is one of the enabling factors of these big four to be achieved. But in the budget, when you scrutinize it, originally it had been proposed that more teachers will be employed, especially to provide for the 100% transition from primary to secondary. And honorable members, this affects you exactly from where you are, because when you go back home, you realize that more primary school kids have elevated themselves to the second school level, but there are no teachers in the second school level. So therefore, there was a proposal that 16,000 teachers be employed to facilitate for the 100% transition from primary to secondary. And a further 5,000 teachers as a normal, usual yearly employment. As I say this, I'm happy the chair of the budget committee is listening. That there's no any money allocated for the employment of the teachers in this budget, and the budget for the Teacher Service Commission remains the same. And therefore, I will be proposing an amendment, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we get money to employ more teachers for our schools in order to enhance the 100% transition rate. Moving forward, there is the issue of, which I want to support, of increasing 30%, or increasing the money that goes to carer for repair of our roads, which are now in very bad state. That one is applaudable. I would wish to applaud the budget committee for that. But finally, there is the issue which everybody has talked about, which is the issue of which magic formula was used to pick on a few counties and leave other counties. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I want to beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. Next on my request list is a member for Igembe Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion. And Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, noting that this House, being the budget-making body in this great country of Kenya, we should put our feet forward so that whatever we decide here should not be changed in any way, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me commend the chair to the Budget Committee and his team for the work they have done from burning the midnight oil to come up with these proposals. And so far, so good, but nobody can be perfect. Nobody can do everything to the best. That's why these estimates are brought to the House for us to debate and share so that we can make corrections, amendments where possible. Madam Speaker, the budget is trying to capture so much most of the pending bills which have been there, and if we don't pay our bills, Madam Speaker, then the country will be internally indebted, and therefore I can see the chairman and the committee trying the best to absorb most of the pending bills so that they can be paid. Madam Speaker, it is the honors of the ministries now who get this money to be prudent enough. They should be realistic enough. They should put their feet forward and utilize these funds as per, and more so make sure that we ensure 100% absorption of the same, and more so looking into the aspects of corruption and guarding against wastage, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm happy that the budget has looked into the dilapidated roads, especially after the rains, and that $1 million per constituency, Madam Speaker, will cushion that big problem which we have in the constituencies, and more so repair the roads which were washed away during the rains which have been pondering our country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, but I've got my reservations in that we have this CICDC, or the Constituency Industrial Development Centers, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there was a deduction of 700 million, Madam Speaker, whereas we are turning to we wanted to change our curriculum so that we can train our youth and our children to do to go for these trainings, so that at least we can produce experts and not just bookworms, and we deviate a bit from the universities, Madam Speaker. So reducing this 700 million, I think it was a big blow to the education sector and especially to the constituencies, and I would request the chair and the committee to redesign the same, and we will bring an amendment to that one, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on the same token, we needed a budget for the teachers, Madam Speaker. To date, we are talking of a shortage of almost 80,000 teachers in our country. We need teachers to teach our children. We know all the children who did their KCPE. All of them were absorbed in our day and the secondary schools. And if we don't factor that funding so that we can train this workforce, which is in the waiting, Madam Speaker. We might be doing a lot of disservice to our country, Madam Speaker. So in employment, so that we don't, when we talk of shortage of teachers, and TSC should not complain that they don't have the funding to employ more teachers, I propose they need more funding, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, coming to NYS, I would say this is an institution which had been given too much it had bitten too much, and it could not chew. And therefore, I commend the committee for reducing the same by 8.5 billion, and let me criticize the press for saying that they have been given only 80 million, but they have not been given 80 million, but 80 million was reduced from their figure, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if we put whatever has been put, what we have put in this paper, and we are following it, it will be prudent now enough for us MPs or members of this parliament to
ability, Madam Speaker, and I'm speaking about an example of the Women Enterprise Fund.
What happened? She still has 3 minutes. Oh, is that time is over? No, you have done. She has actually 3 minutes. Yeah, give her the mic. It was by Mr. I was so sure I know to time. She has done 2 minutes.
No, I didn't know.
I have it back, Madam Speaker, and
You
please,
have 3 more minutes.
please restore my time. I was talking about the social development funds, Madam Speaker, and I'm aware that there is the Biashara Fund, which is pending operationalization, which has resulted in the freezing or, the Women Enterprise Fund, the Youth Enterprise Fund, and the like are not active at the moment, pending the operationalization of the Biashara Fund. Madam Speaker, I'm also aware that the NYS budget, which is the one which goes towards empowering our youth, again, has suffered a fate where we have a lot of decrease in that vote, Madam Speaker, and for good reasons. I totally understand why we have had that decrease, Madam Speaker. And in fact, I would like to say that I would add my voice to the people who are even saying, I wish you could even suspend the whole NYS department until it is put in order, Madam Speaker. So what I'm saying is that this social development aspect of the budget is inactive at the moment. And then when you look at the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, Madam Speaker, there's a very negligible increase, which was done by the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Madam Speaker, and all this, it is really going towards a very detrimental effect on the social aspects of the common mwananchi, Madam Speaker. It is something that we need to look into, in as much as we have the NYS scandal, and we've had that decrease or taking away money from NYS to, give it time for us to really put things in order. But I think when you look at the persons who are suffering, it's the women, it's the youth, it's the poorest, the grassroots populations in this country. Madam Speaker, and what I would like to say is that the monies that have been taken away from NYS, can we look for other avenues through which they will still go towards helping the youth, but not necessarily through NYS, rather than taking them out and putting them in other votes which don't go towards, supporting the initial intended beneficiaries, so that we don't punish the youth because of the corrupt actions of a few people in these ministries, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and in as much as, decrying the fact that this social development aspect of the budget is really at its very minimal, hearing the presentation by the chair of the Tourism and Sports Committee this morning, I was a bit encouraged, Madam Speaker, to see an allocation of 426 million that is going towards a very new initiative called the Ushanga Initiative, Madam Speaker, which is an opportunity for the pastoralist women of this country to finally have a share or a bite of the national cake. Madam Speaker, the Ushanga initiative goes to touch that Turkana woman, Madam Speaker, who puts a lot of energy towards piecing together through beadwork, and to be able to feed her children, to be able to have something to earn from, that craft. Madam Speaker, the women of Narok, the women of Pokot, West Pokot, and the several pastoralist counties which have been flagged as a pilot project for the Ushanga initiative. Madam Speaker, I think this is something which makes me very happy, and any attempts to bring in an amendment to touch on that one, Madam Speaker, I think we will not accept, because already there is a suffering that we are seeing the women, having to bear because of the non-operationalization of the Biashara Fund, Madam Speaker. And so I support that aspect of it, and I pray that the initiative, the Ushanga initiative, is going to be implemented in the best way possible, so that finally we can have the pastoralist women actually benefiting from a craft which they know best how to do. And systematically, I'm hoping that the Kamba women with their baskets and all these other, crafts that the women at the grassroots levels are engaging in will be recognized and given support, so that, they can earn a livelihood.
Thank you. Out of what they know to do best. The member for Turkana Central, the Honorable Nakara Lodepe. Honorable Asheli, we are aware of the systems. Your name was there, so you just sold.
We want this ministry to employ more NPR, so that, Madam Speaker, they can go interior, whereby they can help the locals to stay in peace between themselves, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, 48-10-23, the State Department for Correctional Services. Madam Speaker, if you go around this country, especially the Turkana County where I come from, the prison we have today, it was built during colonial time. It is actually beyond human habitation, Madam Speaker. We need to remove those kinds of buildings and build new buildings. Because, Madam Speaker, if you go those prisons, Transoya, West Pokot, or Turkana, the congestion in those prisons, Madam Speaker, they are not for human stay. Madam Speaker, we want this department to make sure that they have built good habitat for people who are there, maybe because of misbehavior or maybe because they went there wrongly. So, Madam Speaker, the issue of establishing programs that will train the prisoners or inmates to gain some knowledge on technical courses. Madam Speaker, we need this ministry also to have that kind of programs, so that when somebody gets out of prison, he will become self-reliant. He can do something that can make him active in the community than going back to the criminal activities that he used to do when he was outside. Madam Speaker, 48-10-32, State Department of Devolution. Madam Speaker, here we want to thank the community for increasing money that will go to devolution department. Madam Speaker, we want this money to be used for essential services that touch the lives of people, especially at rural areas. We want county government to spend a lot of money, or to invest in health, to invest in education, to invest in water. Madam Speaker, those are the services that can touch a local person. Finally, Madam Speaker, as I've seen my times going up, Madam Speaker, even if we have good budget, even if we have a lot of money we have given, there are some 3 key issues that we need to consider, Madam Speaker. Number 1, we must implement this budget to the letter. Number 2, we must do oversight, Madam Speaker. We must do oversight, because we cannot allow the taxes that people have sweated to go just to few individuals who have become rich overnight. We must make sure that we do oversight as members of parliament. Even the assemblies must do oversight. Finally, Madam Speaker, audit. We must audit both the money and the projects. Because, Madam Speaker, you cannot audit money and you cannot even see where the project is. So we are encouraging the organizations or agencies to make sure that, Madam Speaker, both money.
Your time, you're not on record, your time is over. Honorable member, you're not on record. The Honorable Cecily Barile.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me a chance to also contribute to this important motion that seeks to pass the budget for the year 2018-2019. And may I begin by first congratulating the chairman of the Budget Committee and the entire membership of that committee for a job well done. And also go further and really thank the departmental committees also for a great job that they have done over the past several weeks, Madam Speaker, while we were on recess. And I must say that having sat here this morning and listened to every chair of committee as they gave their presentation on behalf of their committees, it was clear that the committees did take real initiative of ensuring that they looked into the various budgets of their ministries, and they also made serious observations that were made available to this House this morning, Madam Speaker. But I do hope that these critical observations that the committees observed will be able to be shared with the Ministry of Finance or with Treasury and the various line ministries, because they are observations that, in my view, would only add value to the work that we are doing, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, one of the issues that has been raised is that this particular budget is really aimed at ensuring that we implement the Big Four, and in particular, emphasis on food security, universal health care, manufacturing, and affordable housing, Madam Speaker. But looking at that budget, we still are seeing gaps in terms of real budget allocations earmarked specifically for projects that will enable, that will ensure that we do achieve the Big Four agenda. So going forward, we are hoping that we can be able to have very clear budgetary allocations, as was proposed by the Budget Committee, that are aimed at ensuring that we achieve the Big Four, so that we do not lump it together with the rest of the budget, and we can be able to know how we are implementing this agenda and whether we are really getting there, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there's also a very important proposal that was made by the Budget Committee, which proposed that the Parliamentary Budget Office does actually put together a list or compendium of projects that are at the national level for use by committees, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's only yesterday in the Budget Committee, in our Committee of Energy, where members were saying that we need to enhance our oversight role as a committee, and therefore we need to be on top of things in understanding what projects are happening where within the ministry, and to ensure that we monitor and evaluate the same as we move along. And therefore, this particular proposal to the budget, the Parliamentary Budget Office, is a proposal that should be taken seriously, and I hope that we can have this list of projects so that every committee can be able to follow up on the projects that are happening in the various ministries, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, also of importance is the whole issue of state agencies and how they spend their money. It is clear that the scrutiny of the budgets of state agencies, that is parastatals, and other agencies that are not necessarily lying within ministries, needs there's need for deeper scrutiny in view of the ongoing corruption issues that are being raised every day. Madam Speaker, most of these state agencies do not bring their full budgets to the committees for scrutiny, Madam Speaker, and it's no wonder that we are reading stories of budgets being moved from one item to another without due regard of the law. We are also seeing, money being inflated for certain projects without due regard of the law. And therefore, I think going forward, there's need, number one, to be able to understand the budgets of these state agencies by the committees, and also to understand the absorption levels of these state agencies, of the budgets that they present, and prudent utilization of the same, so that, Madam Speaker, there can be better oversight of the state agencies. Madam Speaker, also, I think it is important that we have the key drivers of the...
Your time is over, but very well spoken. Very well spoken, Honorable Cecily Baril. Honorable Muliunki.
To be where it is, I wanted to inform him in his absentia that the availability of cane can only be tackled if Mumias Sugar is able to pay farmers, because you can't expect farmers to get engaged in farming cane when they cannot be paid. Therefore, the corruption that took place in Mumias those days is affected us from those days, and up to now, we are still victims. Madam Speaker, coming back to the budget, I want to thank the committee, and as a member of the Committee on Environment, Forestry, Water Services, and Sanitation, I want to thank them because in total they have 58 billion allocation, and this 58 billion means that at least our dams that are under process will be complete. Our water supply programs will be done, and that the forests that have currently been depleted will be restored by planting new seedlings. Madam Speaker, I want to just request this house, because we've been given the role of budgeting. But as we budget, we need to also extend to oversighting the operations of this budget. Because, Madam Speaker, there are cases where money has been allocated on roads and other projects, and then you find that other than the money not being reallocated again, the contractors who have been given these jobs to do are not working on the roads. For example, I have a road in Mumias East of 26 kilometers. The contractor has finished 2 years, and he has only covered 6 kilometers. And you wonder what happens, because I'm told they are supposed to be paid on certificates of 3 kilometers, and then you go for a certificate. But even if that is the mode of payment, why can't he move faster so that he finishes the 3 kilometers as many as possible, so that we can complete that road and go to another one? Madam Speaker, I think it is the responsibility of this House to make sure that that is done. Madam Speaker, I also just wanted to advise members and also the government that we need to start working on programs. Like, for example, we had a policy on Vision 2030. I was talking to some member outside here, and he was asking, are you supporting Vision 2030 or you are supporting the Big Four? But I told him, and which I also want to repeat here, that actually the Big Four has been picked from the Vision 2030. Because if you went for manufacturing, Konza City is under manufacturing, and we are just, it was both in Vision 2030, and it's also in the Big Four, and we know that the President is still on course in terms of promoting
the budget allocation to at least pass a ceiling to 5 to 6%. That is what is expected. 2, the spread of the armworms, particularly in the maize-growing areas in the south, north, and Trans Nzoia and Western Acacia regions, will affect the maize production, and therefore I did not see anything specific on the allocation. For example, the State Department of Agriculture asked for 826 million shillings. It was never given. So expect, Madam Speaker, reduction of food in this country because the government did not move and they had its priorities upside down. The other thing is that we want to do is, as some mentioned, the fertilizers, Madam Speaker, and I think that this has come in, it comes in here and out. It's very, very little. We get an acute shortage of fertilizer, inefficient distribution of the very important commodity. Again, this, I can tell you, will reduce the production of maize this year. The other thing is that the committee has mentioned, they went round on these counties. I'm surprised, as mentioned by my colleague, Honorable Omolwa, we have not had any visit in Trans Nzoia, and we are demanding that the next one should be Trans Nzoia. 4 years running, we have been excluded. No wonder we have been complaining. Thirdly, maize. Maize, Madam Speaker, again, is an issue that I come from Trans Nzoia. We are not happy. I can tell you frustrated farmers today in Trans Nzoia, and I want to say it for a fact, me one of them. We are so frustrated with the way the government has handled farmers in this country that we are now looking at an alternative way of actually dealing with the crop production. We are now moving away, and I'll be in the forefront to advise my farmers in the area to move away from planting maize to something else, so that at least we can be happy like other people. So frustrated farmers are now very disheartened, and are not energetic in actually farming or planting maize. And so we now may be turning to something else that can bring in some income. Two, and lastly and not least, I'm also happy that the policy of the budget is that now they do not want to fund state agencies and government procedures that have audit query. I quite agree. Why to give money to a state agent or a procedure or even a ministry which has an audit query? We should not do that. One of which, of course, an obvious one, which is NYS. In fact, the 8 billion money that was given to them should not even be given. It should be removed. Just have some little money for the boys to get food and what have you. Remove it to at least 3 billion shillings from the current 8 billion shillings. Madam Speaker, KMC, Kenya Meat Commission, there's another problem, and I speak because I'm in the Committee of Agriculture. Madam Speaker, there's an issue. KMC is one of the best procedures, but it has not been funded properly. Actually, at one time, they were asking for, we allocated 500 million, and it was reduced to 125 million, from what I think the chairman of the committee was saying. Why? And therefore, we are expecting even the possible litigation, but the contractors on site, because it has also not been well handled, and yet KMC is one of the oldest and most efficient parastatals in this country. Madam Speaker, I want to conclude by saying, let's do something on allocation of funds to the Ministry of Agriculture, straight from the current 2% to about 6 to 5%. Otherwise, the farmers are very disheartened.
Thank you, thank you. And the Honorable Member for Kwanza, you always sit next to the member for Moroni. I was referring previously to the member of Moroni, who was consulting loudly with the Honorable Ashiali. I'm sure they come from the same place. The Honorable Chebet Tum. Nandi, Representative Chebet Tum.
Honorable Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the budget making process.
Order,
estimates.
Order, Honorable Member. And the member was not made the maiden speech. At my discretion, I'll be able to give you more a chance to speak. If you have not made your maiden speech and you're ready, you can maybe approach.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I want to say public participation in budget making process is important, and we have been told 12 counties were covered during this budget making process. So I don't know the rationale whether it was logical to do what has been done. So my prayer is in the near future, let all the 47 counties be covered, because we know bottom-up approach to development is important, because the people are informed, the people identify the projects of their choice, their felt needs are addressed. So in the near future, let's capture all the 47 counties, because I know we have default many things. There are counties in place, so even our budget making process should be default. On the issue of budget, when the budget is approved, it is my prayer that money is released to the ministries at the right time, so that we continue with development. We developed the unfinished projects in the country. The other issue is the issue of control or budget. When the money has been approved, there is need to control the approved budget, so that we minimize the issue of corruption, which is a cancer in our nation. So there is need of strict use of money which has been approved. On the issue of the 30 million, which was given to sub-counties, I'm saying that is okay, but in the near future, there is need to keep additional funds to the women reps, because we are getting minimal funds and we are covering quite a number of...
If that doesn't work, definitely we must be talking about deficits, we must be talking about issues of borrowing, we must be talking about so many other things that are really necessary for the basic needs to be met. Number two, Madam Speaker, I wanted to bring to the attention of the members, which is like a point of information, that public hearings that we are talking about this time around are the very first. We had not done any before as this House. So when members are complaining that my county was not visited, my constituency was left out, and it has not been visited for the last 4 years or so, I think that's not for us. We are beginning, this is our first year, and we have developed a very serious framework in terms of how to operate them. We are looking at the Agenda 4, we are clustering counties in the regions before we finally get into a particular county within a cluster. So it's not just a matter of a list is done or somebody's just imagining in terms of where to be visited and stuff like that. Similarly, you might realize that even the counties that were visited, some of the people are trying to insinuate that these could be members of the committees and stuff. You realize that less than a quarter of the committee members had the opportunity to have public hearings take place in their counties. The third one is the whole issue of the budget committee does not come up with figures. The budget committee does not generate figures to place for MDAs or for sagas or for anything else. These figures are generated. Figures are generated at the departmental committees and the various MDAs. To an extent that when they are presented finally to the budget committee, what can happen is only variations based on how those committees convince the budget committee in terms of those needs, in terms of the prioritization, and in terms of so many other things that we are talking about, including the Agenda 4. So budget committee does not generate figures such that one can easily say that, no, the budget committee has given me that and all this, and this is missing. And no. What happens is that these things are generated largely from the BPS, largely from the departmental committees, and then again in relation to how they are presented finally to the budget committee. Besides that, Madam Speaker, I wanted to bring in, there are many things that are weighing down our budget making in terms of balancing out our needs and what we are able the resources that we are able to get out with. One, which needs to be looked at very clearly in future as we move forward, is the issue of duplication. You realize that even at this moment, we were able to notice that there are things that are listed from one department, you get to another, it's also listed, and the third one is listed. You get a department harvesting water. Water harvesting is under Ministry of Water. You get another one harvesting water in irrigation, which is under devolution. Another one harvesting water under forest, which is completely in another different department. And it's basically the same thing, duplication. We realize that there's this thing of training the youth trainings and stuff like that. You get that in the Ministry of Education, you get that in the Ministry of Industrialization, and in the end, there's quite a bit of duplication that is happening. Because of time, Madam Speaker, the whole issue of budget implementation is where we are missing, because many things appear finally as pending bills because we didn't properly monitor the budget implementation. I want to really plead with the House that we get into a way where we can monitor the implementation of this budget. From July onwards to March the following year, a lot is happening. The House is completely out of it, but then these are the burdens that we inherit when we are making the budget at the end of the day, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Very well, very well. The member for Kimilili, Barasa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. First, let me say I want to appreciate the subcommittee that visited Bungoma County to collect views from the people who traveled from very long distances to come and give their views, specifically in identifying the project that should be given priority, Madam Speaker. But I'm going through their report. I saw clearly that they had captured what they wanted and what the people of Bungoma wanted, and I want to appreciate the subcommittee that was led by Honorable Nyonga. But at the same time, Madam Speaker, I've gone through the final document by the committee that is chaired by Honorable Ichungwa, and that the people of Bungoma are very disappointed, Madam Speaker, that none of their projects they identified had been captured. I think, as Parliament, we must give the people of this country the respect that when we get their views and when we are coming up with a final document, if we just put our own things, I think that is not right, Madam Speaker. And I think that the people of Bungoma deserve some bit of respect, because what they had wanted was to dwell the road from Skoma to Kandui, and it was very clear, Madam Speaker. I attended the meeting myself, together with the Honorable Omnyinyi, the Member of Parliament for Kandui, but going through the report that had been tabled in this House, that the views of the people of Bungoma had not been captured, and as committee, not just the committee on budget, but any other committee that will go out to Kenyans to get their views, they must actually put their views into the final report as a way of appreciating the spirit of Constitution that actually makes the role of the Kenyans very cardinal in any of that public participation, Madam Speaker. And I think I'm hoping that we, the members of Parliament from Bungoma, we had put in some kind of an amendments, and we hope that once it's approved, we'll be able to debate this on the floor, Madam Speaker, because really, I will find
contributions towards this particular issue, which is budget making. Madam Speaker, I wish to state from the onset that budget making, Madam Speaker, is a preserve of this House, and it's very absurd at times when we fall at the whims of the executive who are actually planning for us. Madam Speaker, it is the members of this House are supposed to be looking at the budgets, follow it strictly, and dictate on how to make it, and especially through public participation. Like, if we were to look at the areas which these people visited, they're also biased. After visiting those particular areas, it is those areas where the committee members come from, and then it is those particular areas where they are allocating money. When you look at the counties and constituencies which money are allocated, they are repeatedly coming up again. You look at the water, you look at this constituency, that constituency, you go to other issue, the same constituencies come back or come up. Madam Speaker, I think it is high time we look at the budget of this nation as a serious matter that belongs to the whole nation, not particular constituencies. Madam Speaker, there is another serious matter that deals with borrowing. Madam Speaker, this country is borrowing a lot of money, and I think it's not making any change. It's just like the overtaxing. You know, sometimes we tax the people of this country thinking that we are making a lot of money for development and other matters. But, Madam Speaker, overtaxing members of this country is actually worsening the situation, because it is those same people who are supposed to be supporting the projects that we are making, and we are overtaxing them. Madam Speaker, we should be looking at those when we are doing our budgets. Another issue, Madam Speaker, which equally disappointed me is the issue of equalization fund. Madam Speaker, as per the Constitution, equalization funds are meant to be allocated every financial year, but in this particular budget. Madam Speaker, that is very disappointing. We are supposed to be proactive. We are supposed to be looking at what are the needs of this nation, so that all those areas which you are trying to equalize must be equalized like other areas. And Madam Speaker, the introduction of new method of looking at those particular areas, we don't reject it. But Madam Speaker, those areas which had been identified must finish the allocation which was given by the Constitution, so that we start a new system. Madam Speaker, I've also looked at how they have allocated money on dams and boreholes, the roads, and health, and also the KMTCs. And I'm quite disappointed, Madam Speaker, because I remember my constituency had been allocated. Actually, they had launched several roads, tarmac roads, but I'm not seeing anywhere being mentioned. I remember also the president came to my constituency during the campaigns and launched a 400 million worth level 4 hospital, and I'm not seeing it anywhere. And Madam Speaker, I was also talking with the health chair. Me, myself, with the use of CDF money, we have managed to build a KMTC, and I'm very happy that they have allocated money to the KMTCs, and I'm hoping that my constituency will be included, because so far I've made some progress, and we would wish to have this particular money to come and assist us. Madam Speaker, among the stalled projects, the government stalled projects, like I said, the Murwadigir Level 4 Hospital is among them, and I would wish to see it being included. Lastly, Madam Speaker, I would wish to talk about how these monies are allocated. Sometimes we are biased in location. Like people, most of the members have been complaining about the NYS. The NYS, like if we were to remove money from the NYS, we are not going to change anything. What we need to remove from the NYS are the corrupt people who are actually mismanaging the money that we put to the NYS. And Madam Speaker, I would wish we also sit in this house and make a legislation that will change what NYS is supposed to do. NYS, we need to arm them. We need to put them as guards to the public and all these state offices, so that instead of using police to guard the gates of some people, we should use NYS. Instead of using police to guard banks, we should use NYS. We should make use of these people. We are pumping millions of money to them. Madam Speaker, one thing that disappoints me is the allocation of NIS, National Intelligence Service, allocating NIS 332 billion, and yet we are allocating.
You have 1 minute. Just give him 1 minute. Honorable member for...
Madam Speaker, I was just saying, and thank you for allowing...
question. Just 1 moment. Honorable Oyo Onyango. This is not a marketplace. You must respect the House and even the member who is contributing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you also for adding me this 1 minute. Madam Speaker, I was talking about the NIS. We all know the function of the NYS. NIS, National Intelligence Service. But Madam Speaker, the function of the police, Kenya Police Service, cannot supersede, actually the function of the NIS cannot supersede the function of the Kenya Police. Why do we allocate Kenya Police 630 million while we are allocating NIS, which has never tabled any report in this House, 32 whooping billion? They have never given us any assessment. They tell us they look at the intelligence. They tell us they look around the country for the terrorists. They tell us they look at the political temperatures in the country. Those are nonsense, Madam Speaker. We need real work. The work which is done by the police should be added money. We should slash this money, even up to 10 billion to NIS. We give to police, because these are people who are serving everybody in this country. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Kipyegon. The member for Busia County, Honorable Florence Mutua.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And me being a member of the Agriculture Committee, first I want to congratulate the Budget and Appropriation Committee for the good job they have done. And I want to start with the issue of the Kenya Meat Commission. I want to commend the committee for allocating 85 million to the Kenya Meat Commission for the settlement of pending bills owed to farmers. But, Madam Speaker, we as a country, we have been talking about food security as one of the pillars. We cannot talk about food security without talking about livestock. When people talk about food security, they only think about crops. We also need to think about livestock as part of food security. So we need KMC supported fully, not just the pending bills. There is somebody in this country who seems to want to privatize KMC, and we will not allow this. So, Madam Speaker, we want, moving forward, for KMC to be fully supported so that it can be fully mechanized, so that it can operate at par as the very many countries that we have visited are to benchmark. Madam Speaker, I have been sitting here listening to our members, honorable members, speaking about NYS, how it is corrupt, how we should deny it funding, how the money should be reallocated to poor counties and constituencies and all that. Madam Speaker, we are only not talking about NYS. It's not NYS only that is corrupt. We have very many departments in this country that are corrupt. Are we going to deny all of them money? Are we going to now reallocate money from them to other areas? Are we losing the fight in corruption? We need as a country to put stopgap measures on all those avenues that are being used for corruption and fight schools that are permanently built. We have no desks. We have no toilets. We need these facilities done. We cannot be giving money all the time and then us as members of parliament are called for harambes every other day to go and buy desks. That is not the role of a member of parliament. There are funds that have been allocated for these specific jobs. So let the person who is doing that job be able to buy the desks and have toilets for our girls in the schools. Madam Speaker, I just want to finish by stating that us as women representatives, we have very many roles that we do in this country. It is unfortunate that our work has not been appreciated yet, and we have not even been appreciated yet as members of parliament. But given the fact that the little funding we got even last time, we have really been able to do a lot of things. We have worked with economically empowered women, we have economically empowered youth, and we are doing a lot of work, especially for GBV, gender-based violence, and pregnant.
Dispensing the compensation money, which I also want to commend the Committee on Agriculture that has been very supportive. We have a remaining balance of 450 million. I'm told that money is now available, and so by end of August, I hope we can fully compensate these people, Madam Speaker. Another area which I have also discussed with the Committee on Lands, and I'll be writing something to them, is on titling of land to the people of Mwea so that they can take ownership, so that they can be able to use it for their economic advancement. Madam Speaker, as I conclude, I want to raise an issue that is very important. Madam Speaker, constituencies are units of representation, but in a number of times we have used them as units of resource allocation. In this country, Madam Speaker, some constituencies are larger than others. My constituency, which is the most populated in Kenya, has about 200,000 people compared to other constituencies that could be less than 50,000. Yet the resources are the same. Madam Speaker, we're creating a disparity which in 10 years' time, we will notice a great difference in.
Very well, the member from where? Is not the father of the house, is long-serving member for Kadui. Wafula.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Picking from where my colleague is left, the process of distribution of resources must be equitable. But I want to tell you that your constituency is not the largest, because mine has over 300,000, yours is only 200. So it's been very unfair when we get same amount of money. I do support that point. We need to give the money, even CDF must be given equitably. And if that cannot be done, we would rather give it to somebody else to manage it, maybe national government or county governments. Or we do it properly so that we benefit all the Kenyans. Madam Speaker, this has applied also even at budget level. I was looking at the budget for universities, for instance. Universities in your region, in central region, have been given huge sums of money, some in billions. When you come to universities, you look at it. When you come to university, like in Western, Masinde Muliro, Kibabi University, given just a mere 30 million shillings, one of them, another one 25 million. In Guinea, another one in Central has been given 1.4 billion. So this is fair and fair when you note that the university...
Yes, Honorable Wamunyinyi, there is an intervention from your, the member from where? And member from where?
I hope it doesn't eat into my time. We have only 5 minutes, Madam Speaker.
Yes, and it should be something out of order. And you must, and you know, members, I'll be referring you to your standing order. You must quote your standing order. What is out of order?
Madam Speaker, with due respect to my colleague, he referred to my region, that is Central Region, as having been favored, Madam Speaker. I think that's a serious allegation and a bad one in the atmosphere that we are in the country.
No. Honorable member, it's not a bad one. Honorable member, it is a house of debate. And so the honorable member for Kandui has the right to debate in the house. Of course, I know you were speaking from where you sit, but he has a right to debate. This is a budget, and those are his observations. Which now? Yes, Honorable Kadri.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for that protection. But I'm not being tribal or complaining against your area. I'm only saying there should be some equity. There should be equitable distribution of resources. Let all parts of the country be funded to make sure that we represent the people adequately and prevent this from happening, Madam Speaker. With those few remarks, I want to thank you for the extra minute you added me. I support.
Very well, very well. Not the Muslims. Honorable Hema. Give her the mic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute. You know, we are fasting and time was running. I was getting worried. Madam Speaker, I also want to join my colleagues in supporting this budget and to congratulate the committee of budget for doing a good budget process that was participatory, that had teamwork from what we are gathering, that at least they have visited some counties, and it was the first initiative ever. So I want to congratulate them for that. It is an excellent budget. It is quite involving. And I must say that at least most sectors of the budget covered most aspects. Infrastructure was covered. The Big Four agenda was covered. Therefore, I want to say congratulations. Madam Chair, I want to speak on 2 issues. Number 1, Madam Speaker, I want to understand why the Budget Committee felt necessary to reduce the allocation of school feeding program to cut the budget by 300 million. When I saw a member was trying to bring a motion to ensure that school feeding program become sort of a compulsory and a national-wide activity. Therefore, I don't know why that amount was reduced. Madam Speaker, on the issue of NYS, it is given that NYS has become a cash cow since it became vibrant from way back 2015, 2016 to date. But, Madam Speaker, NYS is not the only institution that has been identified with corruption. We have seen big corruption in KPA. We have seen big corruption in many other ministries. So I think this is not fair. NYS has brought a lot of transformation in the lives of the youth of this country. It has some social component that had worked for women empowerment. Therefore, I think the best way of dealing with corruption, in my view, is not to cut budget, but to put adequate measures to ensure that corruption does not thrive. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I think the committee needs to look at that. Secondly, Madam Speaker, I want to speak about the equalization fund. Madam Speaker, it is not fair that this fund is not put in the budget because of lacuna in policy. Since inception of this equalization fund, Madam Speaker, we have been having a lot of challenge. And the most worrying, and not that I'm opposing, is redefinition of marginalization and trying to bring many counties into the marginalization pocket when the ones that are already meant to be demarginalized have not been done so. Therefore, Madam Speaker, in my view, I want to urge this House to fast-track the process of implementing the marginalization policy so that at least the 14 counties that were initially meant to catch up with other counties can benefit from this fund. Lastly, Madam Speaker, I want to speak about the Affirmative Action Fund that are meant for the women rep. Madam Speaker, as it is, the women reps are marginalized because we are campaigning in the entire county, just like the governors who control a lot of resources. When we are just having a mayor, a small resources to enable us to achieve on our mandate. Especially those of us like me from Isiolo and Lamu County. We are already marginalized further because we have only 2 constituencies. We need an affirmative action within an affirmative action. Therefore, Madam
Committee's report, and I want to congratulate them for well. I think this budget ought to ensure that there is fair and equitable distribution of funds across the region of this country. Madam Speaker, you will find that when the funds are allocated to counties, there are certain marginalized areas within the county itself. If also the allocations we are making within the national government is done in a manner that does not reflect the entire...
5 minutes for each member. We are all going to speak to this. I think it's a very important, motion for the House and the members. So let us be patient. The member for Daragwa, is he? The Honorable Jeremiah Kioni?
Tisana.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for that opportunity. And Madam Speaker, in supporting and congratulating the committee, I must say that the committee was able to produce a good report that we can debate because certainly without doubt of the quality of the cracks that have been assigned to that committee. And I see the Vice Chair of the Parliamentary Select Committee, Parliamentary Service Committee sitting here. And I know she'll take note of that. Without good cracks in the committee, you will not be doing anything. And with that, Madam Speaker or Mr. Speaker, I see there's a change of guards. Let me say this, that one of the reasons why public participation was included in the budget-making process was the reason because there before, budgets were being made in Treasury by ministers, and when they were making those budgets, they would favor their own areas, forget about the regions they came from. This budget committee, as it endeavors to implement the provisions of the Constitution and the Public Management Act, Finance Management Act, must make sure also that the members in that committee don't fall into the same trap of looking at the areas they come from and favoring those areas with one way or another. If that happens, we will call them out. And I think why I say this is because, Mr. Speaker, I hear we could not be able to hold public participation in all the counties. But it is also necessary for us to be told exactly this lab-on sampling, whichever method they used to arrive at the number of counties that they went to, must also be well communicated to the public, and we must be able to buy into it. The reasons that have been adduced here are not convincing enough. We do not want them to select counties and go to those counties for any other reason other than for the fact that they could not go to all of them. And Mr. Speaker, when the question that begs for an answer is, we hear they went to Bungoma among other counties, and I say Bungoma because members from Bungoma talked about it just a while ago. They did not come to Nyandarua. They have taken the views of the people of Bungoma. How is it that they arrived at some proposals for the people of Nyandarua? There are two standards. Those in Bungoma said what they want, but those in Nyandarua, others sat in an office and decided what we want. I think that we must be very careful going forward with that kind of position. And I talk about Nyandarua, the president was there on 2-3 occasions before the conclusion of the last elections, and he clearly kept repeating, Nyandarua is a marginalized county, and I don't know why the budget-making team did not capture that. For the reason that we had even been promised dams will be done in that area. And Mr. Speaker, you come from my neighboring county, Laikipia. The 3 dams of Keja, Malewa, and Pesi, you are also supposed to be a beneficiary. The bad news is they are not in this budget. Not a coin was allocated to them. And we didn't need to know why that happened, why that omission. Tomatoes, when they are rotting in Laikipia, they will have rotted in Daragwa. And when we talk about loads, we suffer the same. It is important that we support that provision for 30 million shillings per constituency. Certainly in Daragwa, we need the money yesterday because our roads have also been damaged heavily by the rains that were there. And without that 30 million shillings, we really will be doing very badly, not just in Daragwa or Nyandarua, but I know it is across the whole country. Good budget-making process, Mr. Speaker, will entail a principle that what has already been started and funding started would be funded in the coming year. I have a road in Daragwa constituency that was funded 5 years ago, and funding was cut, and where we are today, no funds. I can see some money has been allocated this year, thank you for that, but for the last 3-4 years, we missed out in that. I've heard on the issue of equalization quickly is that what was being equalized was not counties, were people in various areas. We must remain faithful to that principle in the Constitution. I don't think I used my time. But finally, Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, an area completely outside my area is KBC. As we look at the issue of media and information and letters filed.
Very well, Honorable Member. Shall we now have Honorable Boni, Member for Kitui Rural.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to the budget. First of all is to congratulate the Committee on Budget and Appropriation for doing good work, despite the limited resources which goes into the budget. I would like to thank them for allocating that million per each constituency for rehabilitation of the roads. Speaker, as we stand today, our roads are in a very sorry situation. And every day, I'm very sure each member is receiving a call from home to remind us how the roads are very, very bad. But more importantly, is the allocation of 10 billion, 10.7 billion to the National Statistics and Information. This is a very good appreciation of statistics. A lot of people don't appreciate statistics. And you know, Mr. Speaker, without statistics, you cannot do proper planning. You cannot come up with good policies. Even the Agenda 4, you need very good statistics for planning and implementation. So I tend to think these are very good thing which has been done. Statistics is very important for resource allocation. Without the statistics, you cannot really allocate resources effectively. Recruitment of staff in the public sector, we need population data. And this 10 billion is going towards preparation and implementation of the census. And I want to remind the House that this year in August, the Bureau of Statistics is going to carry out a pilot census. And next year, we are going to have the full census, so that at least we can have a good database for ourselves. My concern is the public debt. Public debt in this country is rising. And the cost of servicing the public debt is enormous. Donor funds, which we are borrowing, actually we are borrowing a lot of money to this. But when you look at the implementation of the donor funds, is below 50%. And we are paying a lot of penalties. The last time I looked at the figures, the money we are paying for penalties for not utilizing the donor funds is over $1 billion.
And give them enough budgetary allocations so that they can be able to carry out and realize the dream and the vision of the president as he's doing his second term. Mr. Speaker, sir, the ASAL area, a very important area, the ASAL area, where when you have all these floods, you have, of course the floods now are all over the place. They've been all over the place, but apart from that, it's worse in those ASAL areas. Once you go from floods, you go to drought, and funding, quite a bit of funding should have been put in that area, but I do feel that that particular department has not been given enough funding to be able to deal with the issues of climate change, which have been affecting those areas. Mr. Speaker, sir, all the same, I think it was a difficult balancing act, and the committee has done a good job, and in future,
very well. To my left, Honorable Onyango, member for Muhoroni.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for remembering me, albeit a bit too late. Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether to thank this committee because I believe they did a good job, but not a very good job. I want to remind the committee and this House that the process of budget making should be domain of this House and even the oversight. That it would be unnecessary. I know of some businessmen who instead, when they, more so those who are involved with pending bills, they canvass their issues in Treasury. And Treasury should not be the people responsible for making this budget. So we must take our responsibility very lightly. Because I sit, I'm a towering member of the Subcommittee of Labor and Social Security. I want to say without fear of contradiction in this House that this issue of NYS being blown beyond proportion. NYS stands for National Youth Service. And National Youth Service cannot be corrupt. These individuals within National Youth Service who are deemed to be corrupt. I say deemed to be corrupt because they've been arrested and their cases are being handled by competent courts, jurisdictions, which will soon decide whether they are culpable or not. But otherwise, the department is not corrupt. The NYS as an institution is not corrupt. Individuals who are corrupt, and we want the government to ensure that corruption is removed from our midst. And by removing corruption, we must stop this cosmetic attitude of pinching a few people here and there, and then we purport to be dealing with corruption. Corruption starts from the people at the top who make calls to the procurement officers, determining for them who to give the contracts. To the accounting officers, determining for them who to be paid. And unless until we decide to slay the dragon from that angle, we are going to do very little to heal this anathema of corruption. Otherwise, I want to say that in this committee, we are not done very well, because when I looked at education, in the last parliament, we had an element of bursary in the budget. This was removed and we were told, when we complained, we were told that the money had been taken.
Tumekuwa nayo. Ningependa kusema ya kwamba ya kwanza niko na masikitiko kidogo, kwa sababu kama mwanakamati wa kilimo kuna mradi ambao tulikuwa tumekutana na tukakubaliana ya kwamba kwanza utafiti, Bwana Spika, utolewe ama ufanyike kwanza, kwa sababu huu mradi ni mradi ambao umekuwa ukipokea fedha kwa miaka kadhaa, lakini matokeo yake ama mavuno kutoka kwa huu mradi haulinganishwi na fedha ambazo zimekuwa zikipelekwa kwa huu mradi. Ya pili, ningependa kusisitiza ya kwamba ikiwa tutaenda na mpangilio wa kiserikali ya kufanya nchi hii iwe ya kujitegemea kwa chakula, ni lazima pia katika bajeti yetu tuweke fedha za kutosha kwa ukulima kulingana na mipangilio ya nchi za Afrika Mashariki na Kati. Ya pili, ninasikitika kwa sababu kuna makampuni ambazo ziko katika hali nyumba ya maututi. Kampuni kama Mumias, Nzoia, Muhoroni, Chemelil. Wakulima ambayo wako sehemu hii wanategemea ukulima wa miwa. Lakini katika bajeti yetu hatujazingatia maneno ya ukulima ya miwa. Unapata ya kwamba sukari kwa wakati huu, sukari nyingi inatolewa katika nchi za nje. Kama tungeweza kuzingatia ukulima wa miwa katika nchi hii na tuweze kusaidia kampuni hizi kama Mumias, Nzoia, Muhoroni na Chemelil, tungeliweza kuwa na sukari ya kutosha katika nchi hii na kuweza kufanya hata wakulima wetu wawe na furaha na wawe na bidii ya kulima ukulima wa miwa. Jambo la tatu, kwa mipangilio ya kiserikali ni ya kwamba kila nyumba ifikapo mwaka wa 2030 iwe na stima. Kuna mito ambazo hazikauki, siko na maji mwaka mzima. Mito kutoka sehemu hii ya Nyanza na Western Magharibi, mto kama Nzoia. Kama tungezingatia kujenga mabwawa ya kutoa moto, hatungeweza kuwa na shida ya upungufu wa hali ya stima. Kwa hivyo ningelionelea ya kwamba siku zijazo tuzingatie kuweka fedha na kuwa na mipango ya kujenga mabwawa katika hizi mito ambazo hazikauki kamwe.
Order member. What is it, Honorable Korei, member for Narok South?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm one of the committee members of this budget committee. And Mr. Speaker, this is a very important motion, and I think it needs a lot of consideration, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when I look around, I don't see a quorum in the House. I want Mr. Speaker to say, we don't want this motion just to go like that. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't see the quorum.
Okay, very well, member, you are within the right to raise that. Let me just confirm that. Sergeant, should we have the bell for 10 minutes? I actually confirm there is no quorum.
give the speaker room for another 5 more minutes.
28 plus 10.
Very well, honorable members. Honorable members, we are clearly unable to raise the quorum, and therefore, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 34-2, the time now being 6:39 p.m., this House stands adjourned till Thursday, 7th June 2018 at 2:30.